Pica Syndrome, the eating disorder you never heard of. Hello and welcome to the channel. Like most GPs, I do see patients with eating disorders all the time, but I can bet my bottom dollar or pound or Swiss franc that if I asked you to name as many eating disorders as you know, you would confidently name only two: anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa, which are of course the two most well-known eating disorders, devastating conditions that take the lives of over 10,000 people in the USA alone. But did you know about binge eating disorder? Yes, that's an eating disorder in its own category and is an official addiction. There are overeating disorders or syndromes that are not only about someone eating too much, but rather they form part of a syndrome, like the Prader-Willi syndrome, where the patient is almost never slim. Then there is ARFID, ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, which is seen more often in children, is not just about a child who is a fussy eater, in inverted commas, and is heavily linked to other psychiatric or psychological problems like autism, anxiety disorder, and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Another eating disorder that is not so commonly talked about is Pica Syndrome, PICA. Again, quite a prevalence in children, but as you will hear shortly, there are specific demographics other than children who are affected. I have a few patients who have this condition. The embarrassment level that this condition engenders is moderate. There are worse things in life. But still, it is quite handicapping from a social standpoint, as you will hear from the anecdotes I shall present later on in this video. So, without further ado, let's dive into this unusual medical problem. Pica syndrome is a complex eating disorder characterized by the persistent consumption of non-nutritive and non-food substances over a period of at least 1 month. This disorder is primarily seen in children, but also pregnant women and individuals with developmental disorders, though it can affect people of any age, gender, or background. The term pica comes from the Latin word for magpie, a bird known for eating a wide variety of non-food items. If you are a classical music fan, do check out classical composer Gioacchino Rossini's opera The Thieving Magpie. Very enchanting piece of music with dramatic drum rolls. But the story behind this composition is the very essence of what a magpie is like. It is the true and rather sad story based in France of a servant girl who was falsely accused of stealing stuff. She was tried and found guilty. In one version of the story, she's actually executed. After her death, things still keep going missing. Finally, it is discovered that the real thief was indeed a magpie. In another version of the story, the magpie's loot was found by someone at the last minute before the execution, and the girl was saved. Either way, the townspeople were so guilt-ridden that an annual mass is said in her memory. The magpie is basically a scavenger bird that steals and hoards stuff, including stuff that is not actually edible. It's a hobby thief. But I digress. Whilst pica might appear as a peculiar habit, it is a serious medical condition that can result in significant health problems for sufferers. The phenomenon of pica has been recorded throughout history, with references dating back to ancient medical texts. The earliest mentions can be found in Egyptian papyri, papers basically, and in ancient Greek writings, where the consumption of earth or clay, otherwise known as geophagy, was noted among certain populations. Hippocrates, often referred to as the father of medicine. Remember that all doctors, upon qualifying, must take a so-called Hippocratic oath. Maybe I shall do a video on this one day. So Hippocrates documented cases of people consuming soil, and later Roman texts described similar behaviors. Over the centuries, the condition has been linked to cultural practices, nutritional deficiencies, and psychological disorders. Pica, as it is defined today, is diagnosed when a person persistently eats non-nutritive substances for a period of at least 1 month, and when this behavior is considered inappropriate to their developmental level and, might I add, to their culture, because remember, it is sometimes considered a normal cultural practice. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-5, we're on to number 5, I think, currently, a widely used reference for mental health professionals, classifies pica as an eating disorder. The consumed substances can vary, and many include items such as dirt, as we've mentioned before, geophagy, ice, phagophagy, hair, trichophagy, paper, paint chips, metal, chalk, and many other materials that have no nutritional value. I can certainly add many other things to that list according to my increasing anecdotal information. Leaves, tree bark, cotton wool, soap, wax, including the wax that comes with mini Babybel cheese. I know someone who buys this cheese in large quantities, not to eat the cheese, but rather the wax. Another eats cardboard, and now the family cannot buy foodstuffs that come in cardboard packages like cornflakes because the cardboard keeps getting eaten in the middle of the night. Estimating the prevalence of pica is challenging due to its underreporting and the variability in how it manifests across different populations. However, it is most commonly observed in the following groups: children, particularly those under the age of 6. Younger children often explore their environment by putting objects into their mouths anyway, and in some cases, this behavior extends into a pattern of frank pica. Pregnant women. Pica has been reported among pregnant women, particularly those with nutritional deficiencies. In many cases, cravings for non-food substances during pregnancy may be linked to an underlying need for certain minerals, such as iron or calcium. This is certainly logical. I once heard of a lady who only ate a certain type of mud, the whitish mud you find in limestone areas. Her body was clearly craving calcium, which limestone is high in. Individuals with intellectual disabilities. Pica is frequently seen in individuals with disabilities, particularly those in connection with autism spectrum disorder and other intellectual disabilities. The prevalence of pica in these populations can be as high as 25 to 30%, reflecting the higher incidence of repetitive behaviors and sensory sensitivities. Cultural and geographic variations. In certain regions and cultural groups, geophagy and other forms of pica are normalized or even encouraged. For instance, consuming clay is common in some African, South American, and Southern US communities where it is believed to offer medicinal benefits or protection during pregnancy. And frankly, there could be some logic to this. If you think about the minerals you can find in clay, particularly, as I mentioned, limestone clay, it's not the most hygienic craving to have, but if you examine the logic behind it, it does make sense, even from a medical point of view. A range of risk factors can contribute to the development of pica. These factors include nutritional deficiencies. The most commonly cited cause of pica is nutritional deficiency, particularly in iron, zinc, and calcium. It is thought that the body's cravings for non-food substances may be an attempt to obtain these missing nutrients. Anemia, a condition caused by a lack of red blood cells, is often associated with pica, especially among pregnant women. I think in areas where worm infestation is high, certain tapeworms being the most common cause of iron deficiency in the world. Did you know this? The worm enters your body and feeds on all your iron stores, leaving you with none. Charming guest. Pica syndrome is high in tapeworm regions of the world, and the common denominator is indeed the iron deficiency. Mental health disorders. Pica is strongly associated with mental health conditions, especially those involving cognitive development. Individuals with autism, intellectual disabilities, and schizophrenia are at higher risk of developing pica. It's also linked to obsessive compulsive disorder, as the repetitive nature of eating non-nutritive substances may serve as a coping mechanism for anxiety or stress in these individuals. While some individuals with pica may consume only one type of non-nutritive substance, others may ingest a variety of items. The health risks associated with pica can be very variable, depending on the type and amount of material eaten. Common complications include poisoning. Consuming items that contain toxic substances like lead paint can result in serious health issues, including lead poisoning. Lead poisoning can lead to brain damage, especially amongst children, and may cause developmental delays, behavioral problems, and cognitive impairment. Infections. Imagine ingesting dirt or soil or other contaminated materials. Obviously, increases the risk of parasite infections and other illnesses. For example, geophagy is associated with a higher risk of contracting parasitic infections like toxoplasmosis, a disease that can have severe consequences for pregnant women and their unborn babies. So the very people who are at risk of indulging in pica eating disorder. So this can be a major health issue amongst the pregnant women population. Gastrointestinal problems. Obviously, eating non-food items can cause a variety of digestive issues, including blockages, perforations, and damage to the digestive tract. For example, consuming large amounts of hair, trichophagy, can lead to formation of hairballs, like the ones that can happen in cats, for example. This may require surgical removal if it doesn't come out the natural way. Dental problems. Chewing on hard substances like rocks or metal can cause significant dental issues, including tooth decay, fractures, and also infections. While pica is often linked to nutritional deficiencies, the consumption of non-nutritive substances can actually exacerbate these deficiencies via way of interfering with the absorption of essential nutrients, leading to a worsening of the nutritional deficiency, which the Pica Syndrome is there to correct in the first place. So it can be a real vicious circle. Diagnosing pica can be challenging as, of course, as one would expect, individuals may not readily disclose their behaviors due to embarrassment or fear of judgment. Additionally, some individuals with pica may not view their behavior as problematic, particularly if it is culturally accepted or if they are unaware of the associated health risks. The diagnosis of pica typically involves a thorough medical history and physical examination, as well as psychological evaluation to assess for underlying mental health conditions. The tests that can be done include blood tests, simple blood tests looking for anemia, nutritional deficiencies, or any signs of poisoning or infection. In some cases, stool tests may be used to check for parasitic infections, particularly if the individual has a history of consuming dirt or soil. To treat pica obviously involves trying to find the underlying cause first, if there is one. Anemia is very important to rule out to avoid someone spending huge chunks of their life becoming a social recluse because they are deemed to be a weirdo. Most strange behaviors have an underlying medical issue, in my humble opinion. At least that's what I have always suspected. This is always what I think of first when I hear of outlier behaviors. There's got to be a medical issue. Very important also is to watch out for the effects of eating poisonous substances. For example, heavy metal poisoning from chronic ingestion of pencils or metal, which may compound the psychological picture and confuse the doctors looking after the patient. It is so satisfying to see a child who would normally rate the fridge in winter to chew on ice, refuse ice in their drink even in summer because they are no longer anemic, or to hear from the teacher at school that her chalk is no longer going missing from class because the magpie child has had their calcium deficiency resulting from their kidney disease being properly treated. Have you had or are you currently suffering from Pica Syndrome? What were you driven to eat? You can post your Pica Eats anonymously. Were you psychologically analyzed before your anemia was discovered? What's the weirdest craving you have had in pregnancy? Tell all. The weirder, the better. And if there is anything medical you would like to ask, why not? Go ahead. Askadoc.